Why is it that the older we get, the more we look back instead of forward? You've lived a full life. You've worked hard. You've loved. You've stayed up late to take care of others, held your breath through storms, shown up even when no one noticed. And now, in this quieter chapter, when maybe the house is emptied out, when the calendar has more blank space than it used to, when the world tells you it's finally time to rest, why does your heart still carry so much? Why do regrets, old, familiar ones, start whispering louder? Maybe it's that one conversation you never had. Maybe it's the career you chose because it made sense, but never felt quite right. Maybe it's the silence you kept to keep the peace, or the love you didn't return, the version of yourself you abandoned just to make everything work. This video isn't here to fix that. It's not here to tell you to let it go and move on. It's just a quiet space, a gentle pause, like sitting beside a friend in the temple garden, long after the sun's gone down. Just the sound of the wind, the warmth of tea between your palms, and a soft voice sharing something real. Because Buddhist aging isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming more human, more honest, more free. And maybe if we walk gently together through these stories, one part at a time, something inside you will soften too. Not because I say so, but because you were always ready. If something in this already speaks to the part of you no one sees, hit subscribe. Not for me, for you. So you don't forget this quiet path you've started walking. Let's begin. Part 1, the regret we carry in silence. It's late evening. The kitchen is quiet. The dishwasher hums gently in the background, but everything else feels still. There's a woman, let's say she's 58, sitting alone at the table. She's not really doing anything. Her hand is wrapped around a cup of tea that's gone lukewarm. She's not drinking it, just holding it. Her eyes aren't on the walls, the dishes, or the calendar pinned on the fridge. They're far away, somewhere in the past. She's thinking about her mother. It's been 5 years since her mother passed. And tonight, for some reason she can't explain, the ache of it has crept up again. Not the loss itself, but the silence. The silence between them. The things she never said. The way she always waited for the right time to say, "I'm sorry for being so hard on you." Or, "Thank you for holding everything together." But the right time never came. And so now, in the quiet of her kitchen, she's not just remembering her mother. She's remembering who she was when her mother was still alive. And she's holding something much heavier than that tea. A regret that won't leave her alone. Have you ever sat like that? Maybe not over tea. Maybe it was in your car, parked in the driveway. Maybe it was the moment the house went quiet after the kids had all left. Or maybe it was just a single night, like this one, when you couldn't quite explain why your chest felt a little tight and your thoughts kept circling the same old memory. After 40, regret starts to speak in a different tone. It's not loud. It doesn't throw tantrums. It just lingers. It shows up in pauses, in sighs. In that moment, you scroll through old photos and whisper to no one in particular, "I should have done it differently." Some regrets are easy to name, like choosing the stable job over the one that made your heart come alive, like staying in a relationship too long or not long enough, like the times you said yes when everything in you was screaming no, or worse, the times you said nothing at all. But there are also regrets we can't even find words for. Just that quiet knowing that something inside us was put away, and we never took it back out. In Buddhist aging, we don't see regret as just a leftover emotion. It's not just a memory with sharp edges. It's something that takes up space in our body, in our breath, in how we sleep, how we speak, how we carry ourselves. It becomes part of the weight we bring into later life. That's the thing people don't talk about much. They say aging is about knees that ache and memory that slips. But what really aches is the soul that's been holding on to things for decades. The Buddha once said, "The past is already gone. The future is not yet here. There's only one moment for you to live." But what if part of us never truly leaves the past behind? What if we keep dragging it with us, not because we want to, but because we're afraid of who we'd be without it? I had a friend, Nancy, who once told me that regret felt like an old coat she couldn't take off. "It's not warm," she said, "but it's familiar. And without it, I'd feel naked. We carry regret in silence, not just because it hurts, but because we think it says something about who we are. We think we deserve to carry it. But what if we don't? What if regret isn't proof that we failed, but proof that we cared deeply, that we loved, that we tried, that we're human? I remember one afternoon, sitting in a Buddhist temple tucked away in the hills of Northern California. It was the kind of place where the air always smelled like cedar and incense, and the silence didn't feel empty, it felt kind. A monk, maybe in his 70s, was talking with a small group of us. Someone asked him, "How do you get rid of regret?" He smiled gently and said, "You don't. You just stop arguing with it. And when it knocks, you invite it to sit down for tea. You listen. You learn what it came to teach. And then, when it's ready, you let it leave." That moment stayed with me, because it wasn't about fixing the past. It was about befriending it, letting it become part of your story, not the whole story. So if you're sitting with your own regrets tonight, about a marriage, a child, a choice, a silence, you're not alone. And maybe you don't need to solve it. Maybe you just need to acknowledge it. Maybe tonight, you just whisper, "I see you. I'm still here." That's enough for now. You don't have to fix your past. You just have to stop fighting it. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word. Let's keep going. Part 2, when regret becomes identity. Sometimes it happens in the quiet hours of the morning. You wake up, not because an alarm rang or someone called your name, but because your body's used to rising early. You sit at the edge of the bed, feel the floor under your feet, maybe stretch a little. You shuffle to the kitchen, make your coffee the way you always do. The same mug, the same seat by the window. And then, just as the first sip touches your lips, a thought slides in soft, uninvited. Why didn't I choose differently? Maybe it's not even about something recent. For my friend Richard, it was about a choice he made nearly 40 years ago. Richard was a doctor, a good one. For most of his life, he wore the white coat, listened to heartbeats, and held hands in hospital rooms when families were afraid. People respected him. His patients adored him. He saved lives, but he didn't love it. You see, before medical school, Richard played jazz piano, late into the night, in tiny clubs, at weddings, in his parents' garage when no one else was around. His hands didn't just heal, they made music. But somewhere along the way, music turned into a nice hobby, and medicine became the right thing to do. He followed the path that pleased others, that felt safe, that had a name people admired. And now, in retirement, with no more schedules or patients to tend to, Richard found himself sitting at his grand piano more and more. Not to perform, just to remember. One afternoon, we were sitting together in his sunroom. He looked at me, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup, and he said quietly, "I lived a good life. I know that, but sometimes I feel like I lived the wrong one." He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter, but his voice carried the weight of something unfinished. What struck me most wasn't his regret about not choosing music. It was the way he had folded that regret into who he believed he was. Not, "I made a choice," I question, but "I am the man who chose wrong." There's a difference, isn't there? After a certain age, we stop seeing our regrets as events and start seeing them as evidence. Evidence that we're flawed, that we missed our chance, that who we are is forever tied to what we didn't do. In Buddhist aging, there's a moment, quiet but powerful, when we're invited to look at this, not to fix it, not to change what happened, but to ask, am I still carrying something that no longer belongs to me? Because sometimes we hold on to regret, not because we want to, but because it's become part of our story, part of our name, part of the way we explain ourselves to ourselves. But what if you are not the regret? What if you're simply the one who remembers it? What if the memory can stay, but the weight can go? The Buddha once said in the Dhammapada, "Let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross over to the farther shore of existence." It sounds poetic, maybe even unreachable, but I don't think it's asking us to abandon our lives. I think it's asking us to loosen our grip, to see that every story we tell ourselves, "I should have, could have," I failed to, is just that, a story, a version, not the whole truth, not all of who you are. Richard didn't quit medicine. He didn't run off to become a jazz musician. He didn't try to rewrite his life. He simply began to play again, for himself, slowly, softly, a little each morning. And in doing so, he let that younger version of himself, the one who loved music, step back into the room, not as a ghost, but as a companion. There was no grand forgiveness moment, no big spiritual breakthrough, just a quiet shift in how he saw himself. He was not the man who chose wrong. He was a man who lived fully in one way and still had music inside him. And that was enough. So I want to ask you gently, is there a part of you you've been keeping in the past? A version of yourself you believe you lost forever? And if so, is it really lost? Or just waiting for a little space to return? We don't have to erase what we regret. We only have to stop building our name around it. You are not the mistake. You are the one who survived it. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word. And slowly, another part of the story appears. Part 3, the trap of what if. It usually shows up late at night. You're lying in bed, the lights are off, and everything around you is still. But your mind, it's anything but quiet. It starts flipping through the old pages. Decisions made, roads not taken, that one conversation you never had, the call you didn't make, the words you didn't say, and somewhere in between all of that, there's a whisper. What if I had stayed? What if I had left sooner? What if I had tried just one more time? We think we're just reflecting, but really we're tightening the knot. I remember a woman I once met at a retreat. Her name was Carol. She was 64. Strong presence, smart eyes, warm smile. But behind her stories, there was this heaviness. You could feel it. One afternoon, as we sat under the shade of a maple tree, she shared something with me. I always wanted another child, she said, voice soft. But my husband, he said one was enough. We were struggling financially. I didn't push. I told myself it was the right thing. Then she paused, looked out at the leaves swaying in the breeze. And now it's too late. I still dream about that little girl. She shows up sometimes. I even gave her a name. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. That's the thing about what-if thoughts. They don't yell. They linger. They settle into the corners of our lives. Not loud enough to be called grief. Not clear enough to be healed. Just always there. And the older we get, the more they seem to show up. Because when you're younger, you tell yourself there's still time. But after 40, 50, 60, there's a shift. You feel the finality of certain choices. And that's when what if becomes a trap. Tricks you into thinking you could have known better back then. It makes you believe there was a perfect version of your life, and you somehow missed it. It holds you hostage to a fantasy that never existed. I've fallen into that trap too. Many times. There was a job I turned down in my 30s. A move I almost made. A relationship I almost let go of sooner. And for years, every time something went wrong, I'd whisper to myself, well, maybe if I had chosen differently. But here's the truth that took me a long time to feel, not understand, but really feel. We didn't know then what we know now. We made the best choices we could with the information, the strength, and the clarity we had at the time. That doesn't make everything okay. It just makes it human. There's a Buddhist teaching that stayed with me for years. It's not complicated. In fact, it's almost too simple. You are not walking the wrong path. You are walking the path. The moment I heard it, something softened in me, because it reminded me that I don't have to keep fighting a version of the past that never happened. I can just live here, now, in this version, with all its turns, its messiness, its missing pieces. Carol told me later that she still sometimes thinks of the daughter she never had. But now, when the thought comes, she closes her eyes and sends her love anyway.
No anger.
No shame, just love. Because even the life we didn't live deserves a gentle goodbye. So let me ask you something. Is there a what if that's been following you for years? And if so, What would happen if you stopped answering it? What if you just nodded at it kindly and then turned back to your life as it is? You don't need to untangle every regret. You just need to stop letting them define your now. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word. Let's keep going. Part 4, the wisdom of regret. Have you ever looked back at something painful and felt a strange kind of gratitude? It's not a feeling that comes easily, not when you're in the thick of it, but sometimes years later you glance back at a moment that once broke your heart and realize somehow it taught you something nothing else could have. It happened to my neighbor Susan. She's in her early 70s now, the kind of person who always brings a casserole when someone's sick, always remembers birthdays, and has the gentlest laugh you'll ever hear. But about a year ago, she told me a story that caught me off guard. She had a best friend once, Mary. They met in high school, stayed close all through their 20s and 30s, even raised their kids like cousins. But somewhere in their 40s, something happened, nothing dramatic, just one of those small misunderstandings that slowly hardens into distance. A missed phone call, a forgotten birthday, a few unsaid things, and then nothing. Susan said she carried that silence for over 25 years. The regret crept in slowly. At first, she brushed it off, telling herself, that's just how friendships fade. But every now and then, when she saw two older women walking together in the park, or when a photo of Mary popped up while she was cleaning, she'd feel it again, that quiet ache. One afternoon, Susan heard that Mary had fallen ill. It wasn't terminal, but it was serious, and something in Susan stirred. She didn't make a grand gesture. She just wrote a letter, not to ask for forgiveness, not to explain, just to say, I missed you. I still do. Mary wrote back. They met for tea 2 weeks later, and the first thing Mary said was, I thought of you every birthday. They both laughed and cried and sat in the shared silence of all those years they couldn't get back. And somehow, that made space for something new. Susan didn't tell me that story to offer a lesson. She wasn't trying to impress me with some noble act. She just said, you know, sometimes regret is a sign that you still care. I've carried that line with me ever since. Because in Buddhist aging, we're not told to deny our regrets. We're not asked to scrub them clean or pretend they never happened. Instead, we're invited to look at them softly, to ask, is this regret trying to punish me? Or is it trying to guide me towards something I still need to face? Not all regrets are burdens. Some are reminders, quiet nudges, gentle calls to live differently now. I had a regret once that ate at me for years. I'd been short-tempered with someone I loved during a hard season in my life. I said things I wish I hadn't. I pulled away when they needed me. For the longest time, I kept saying to myself, you ruined it. You don't deserve peace. But peace isn't something we deserve. It's something we slowly make space for. I didn't get to fix that relationship, but I did start showing up more fully in the ones I have now. Not because I'm trying to make up for the past, but because I've felt what it's like to carry something too long, and I don't want to keep doing that. Maybe that's what regret is for in the end. Not to shame us, but to wake us up, to remind us that time is precious, that words matter, that love, once neglected, can still be offered again, in a new form, to a new person, in a new moment. So if there's a regret sitting quietly inside you right now, maybe ask it, what are you here to teach me? Not all pain is meant to stay pain. Some of it grows into clarity. Regret is only wasted when we don't let it soften us. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word, and slowly, another part of the story appears. Part 5, letting go as a daily practice. Sometimes we think letting go is supposed to feel like a grand release. Like one day, we'll finally say the magic words, I forgive myself, or it's over, or I'm done. And just like that, all the weight will fall away. The air will get lighter. Our chest will feel free. We'll walk into the next morning completely unburdened. But it doesn't usually happen that way. More often, letting go looks like waking up and remembering again that we're not going to carry that pain today. Just today. And maybe that's enough. There's an old friend of mine, Frank. He's 67 now. He was married for over 30 years, until a quiet divorce that neither of them saw coming. Well, maybe they did, but they didn't say anything. That's how some marriages end. Not in fire, but in a slow, silent drift. After it all, Frank moved into a small place just outside town. It had a tiny porch and one of those wind chimes that never stops singing when the breeze rolls in. I used to visit him every now and then, bring him soup or help him fix the stubborn lock on his screen door. One day I asked him, "Do you think you've moved on?" He looked at me, didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "No, I think I've just learned how to live with it better." He told me about a small ritual he started doing. Each morning, after brushing his teeth, he'd stand by the window for a minute and say out loud, "I'm not carrying this again today." He said it didn't change the past. It didn't make the grief disappear, but it gave him a place to stand, a moment to choose presence, a way to remind himself that he could live today without letting yesterday decide everything. That stuck with me, because so often we think healing has to be this full, final thing, that if it still hurts sometimes, we must be doing it wrong. But Buddhist aging teaches something gentler, that letting go isn't an event. It's a way of being with yourself. Some days it's silent, other days it stings, and some mornings it shows up in the smallest, quietest moments, like washing a mug that once belonged to someone who's gone, or walking past a song that used to mean something. But every time we choose not to tighten around that pain, every time we breathe through it, name it kindly, or just let it be, we're practicing the art of release. And over time, those moments add up. They change the shape of us, not by force, but by presence. I remember one evening, I was sitting alone on my porch, the same way Frank used to. The thought came back, one I didn't want, an old mistake, person I hurt, and instead of pushing it away or trying to solve it, I whispered, "I'm not carrying this again tonight." It didn't make me feel instantly free, but it made me feel human, and that's something. So if you're wondering how to let go of a regret, a person, a version of yourself you wish you'd been, maybe don't ask how to do it all at once. Maybe just ask how to do it a little today. A walk without the heaviness, a meal without the story, a breath without the blame. That's the work. That's the way. Letting go is not a one-time decision. It's 1,000 quiet choices we make every day. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word. Let's keep going. Part 6, Peace After the Storm. There comes a moment, quiet, often unexpected, when you realize that the thing you've been carrying isn't as loud anymore. It's not that it's gone. Not really. But it doesn't take up the whole room the way it used to. Maybe it happens on a regular Tuesday. You're folding laundry, sipping coffee, or walking out to get the mail. The same driveway, the same sky, but something's shifted. The regret that once wrapped around everything has softened. I saw this happen with my Aunt Linda. She's 65 now, lives alone in a small house filled with books, potted plants, and quiet corners. Her marriage ended 20 years ago, not with anger, but with absence. Her husband simply stopped showing up, not physically, but emotionally. And for years, Linda held onto the weight of that, what she didn't say, what she didn't demand, what she accepted in silence. She'd replay conversations in her mind, wondering when she should have walked away, or fought harder, or spoken up. Regret became a kind of background noise in her life. It didn't scream, it hummed. But one day, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, she told me something changed. She said, "I woke up, looked around, and realized I didn't need him to be sorry anymore." She wasn't bitter when she said it. She wasn't even sad. She was calm. She'd stopped needing the past to explain itself. Stopped needing to untangle every knot. Stopped asking questions that would never get answered. And in that stillness, something else arrived. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from a perfect ending, but the kind that rises after the storm, when the sky hasn't cleared entirely, but the winds have calmed, and you can finally breathe without bracing. That kind. Linda didn't get there by figuring it out. She didn't read a dozen self-help books or force herself to forgive before she was ready. She just lived. one gentle day at a time. She cried when she needed to. She smiled when she could. And somewhere along the way, the weight began to lift. Not because she pushed it off, but because she stopped clinging to it. Sometimes healing is just that. Choosing not to grip the pain. Choosing not to keep it close like a badge or a punishment. Choosing to make space for something else, like the scent of a good meal, or the breeze through the window, or the laugh of a grandchild who doesn't care about your past, only your presence. Buddhist aging doesn't promise us that we'll be free of regret, but it shows us that we can grow wide enough to hold regret and peace in the same heart. We can be people who've made mistakes and still deserve joy. We can be people who've stayed too long and still find freedom. We can be people who've missed some chances and still wake up to new ones. You're not too late, not for stillness, not for softness, not for beginning again inside your own life. So if there's something you're carrying, something that still whispers late at night, maybe just pause for a moment, breathe, and say, I've held you long enough. It's okay if you rest now, not to erase it, not to deny it, but to offer it kindness. And in return, maybe offer some to yourself. Peace doesn't come because everything is resolved. It comes when you stop needing it to be. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word, and gently, the story finds its breath again. Part 7, when you finally come home to yourself. It's strange, isn't it? You spend years, sometimes decades, trying to be everything to everyone, trying to make it all work, trying to hold on to what's falling apart. And then one day, when the noise quiets down, when no one's calling, no one's asking, and all the chaos has faded into memory, you look around and realize you never really got to be with yourself. I met a man named Bill once. He was 72, tall, quiet, the kind of man who had learned to listen more than speak. We were sitting together on a temple bench after a morning meditation, and I asked him how he felt about growing older. He said something I'll never forget. I used to think I was aging into loneliness, but really, I was aging into honesty. He went on to tell me about all the years he spent saying yes when he meant no, working long hours because that's what was expected, being the provider, the rock, the man who never needed help. He built a life, but somewhere along the way he'd lost himself. And it wasn't until his late 60s, after his kids had moved away, after his marriage had ended gently but completely, after he retired from the only job he'd ever known, that the silence came. First, it scared him. The quiet, the space, the long days with no one to answer to. But eventually, it became something else, a kind of return. He began walking every morning, just around the block. He started playing guitar again, an old hobby from his teens. He cooked simple meals, watched the sun set from the same chair each night. He said the regret was still there, like an old scar, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It had softened into understanding. He told me, I stopped waiting to be forgiven, and I started sitting with the part of me that needed forgiveness. That line moved through me like a breeze through wind chimes, because that's what so many of us need. Not more thinking, not more fixing, just a quiet place to sit with the version of ourselves we left behind. The one who tried, the one who hurt others, the one who didn't know better at the time. In Buddhist aging, there's no rush to arrive, no perfect version to achieve, only this coming home to yourself again and again. Not the self others wanted, not the self you pretended to be, but the self that's left when you stop performing. The self that can sit in silence and feel the ground beneath you. The self that forgives not because it's easy, but because holding on became too heavy. The self that doesn't need to be impressive anymore, just real. That's the quiet beauty of growing older. If we're lucky, if we're honest, we start to realize that we don't want more. We want true connection, true peace, true presence. Even if we've taken the long road, even if we made 1,000 wrong turns, it's never too late to come back. Not to a place, not to a person, but to you, right here, right now, in the stillness of this breath. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not what you regret. You are the one who returned. and that matters more than anything. Coming home to yourself is the most sacred journey of all. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word, and gently the story begins again, but lighter this time. So here we are, not with all the answers, not with a perfectly healed heart, but with something more honest than that, a deeper understanding of what it means to live with regret without letting it define you. You've met the weight, you've sat beside it, and maybe for the first time you didn't fight it. You just breathed with it. That's the beginning of peace. Not a grand release, not some perfect closure, just the slow, sacred act of becoming gentler with the life you've lived and the person you are now, because you are not what you didn't do. You're not the moment you stayed silent. You're not the missed chance or the broken chapter or the time you needed more time. You are who remained. You are who chose to stay, to feel, to open, to keep going. And that matters. More than anything else, they couldn't take that from you. So tonight or tomorrow morning, or whenever the weight creeps back in, sit with it. Let it be. Then maybe whisper to yourself, I've carried you long enough. You can rest now. You don't need to erase your past. You just need to make peace with the one who lived it. If this touched something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I always read every word. Until next time, may you rest gently, may you live honestly, and may you keep coming home to yourself again and again.